So thank you, Sean, for accepting this invitation. So I'm happy to talk with you and to find out what exciting things you do.
Thank you. So what do you want to know?
Yes, I know. So I would like to start asking you about your career. So I know that you work a lot in kind of how you can call it, like a gardening, or no, not really gardening, but are you very into sustainable planting?
Sustainable landscaping. Yeah, I would
Exactly.
say so. That or eco landscaping would be good phrases.
So
I also teach and write, um, and I do consulting. I do a little bit of getting my hands dirty as well, but mostly the sort of intellectual side of the business nowadays.
can you explain more why you decided to go that way, or where in what age you start kind of knowing, oh, I'm better be here?
So I grew up in a place called Campbellville, which is about 15 minutes west of where I live now in Milton. And I was very lucky. I've been very lucky my whole life. We had 2.5 acres cut out of a whole country block of conservation land, so deep forest, and that's what I got used to. That's what I grew up with. So I always sort of was out in nature, figuring out what to eat, fascinated by what insects were what, and what birds were what, and what plants were what. So I sort of fell into landscaping. I just kind of started doing it for a teacher, and then for some friends, and then they had cousins, and before I knew it, I had a landscaping business. So I was always sort of weaving in and fascinated by those factors. I don't want to say initiatives, but those factors, the pollinator plants, the native plants. I was familiar with the native plants, and I just sort of built on that. And then at some point, one of my business partners went back to school to be a water resource engineer, and I ended up helping him work on his thesis, and which was really interesting. He was working on the first study for northern climates on what we call bioretention cells, which are engineered rain gardens. And I helped him with the list of plants that you'd grow there, because plants I know, and what plants could stand what level of flooding and salt, because that's often a thing with bioretention cells. And so that sort of got me going in that the rain garden direction, the how to handle rainwater direction. And then I just sort of kept weaving in all of the other things that I did, like drought tolerance and native plants and habitat plantings and so on. And then all of a sudden, the world caught up. All of a sudden, everybody wants what I do, which is great. I don't think I planned any of this. I think I just sort of walking down life's hallway, I went, "Oh, it's nice in here. I'll stay," because everybody wants, not everybody, but a lot of people want to create habitat. 3 times this year, I've said, "So you want to lower your maintenance? What about turning some of your lawn into meadow?" And 2 years ago, that would have got strange looks. And this year, everybody's, "Oh, what a great idea. That's a good idea. We've talked to the right person." Really? I mean, excellent. So yeah, it's just fascinating how so many people are coming on board now. Excuse me. Being one of the early adopters, I suppose. Not that, I was the guy, but lots of people came before me. But that's put me in a position where I'm sort of the old man in the business, where everybody comes and asks questions. And I end up on committees like the Horticultural Outreach Collaborative for the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, and they put together the Grow Me Instead guide, for instance, and the pamphlets on how to control invasive species. I chaired Landscape Ontario's Environmental Stewardship Committee for a while, which, again, every time you do that, you end up absorbing and weaving in more and more things. And then the teaching, I have so much hope for the future, because the young people getting into horticulture all want to fix things. They want to change the world. And I believe that horticulturists deserve capes. that we have all the tools to fix all of the world's problems, whether you're talking about food security or carbon sequestration or save the bees, save the monarchs.
Mhm.
Productivity goes up when you can see a garden out your office window. You get better faster in the hospital if you can see a tree out your window. Street crime goes down if there are gardens along the boulevards and the medians. I really think that we can fix everything. And I think the young people today are gravitating toward horticulture because they realize that too. So again, more and more we're weaving that in. I helped write the National Red Seal, which is the national certification for horticulture, one of many. And we built into that a lot of eco. In fact, there's a whole block on environmental stewardship, soil stewardship, water stewardship, and biodiversity enhancement. So, it's just the world is suddenly ready. And I'm in the right place at the right time with the right skill set.
That's amazing. Yeah. My daughter took, she was living in Chapleau when she said, "Oh, Mom, I'm going to become, what do you call, like a garden specialist?" Or it's another word, like
a horticulturist?
It's more like a garden master's garden.
Oh, master gardener.
Yeah, she got that.
Oh, very good. I'm a master gardener also with the Guelph chapter.
So,
that's fantastic.
When I mentioned, "Oh my God, I'm having a Sean in the podcast." "Oh, I know him," and because you were in that committee also in something like he's very fun. I mean, ask this. She gave me a list of the stuff to ask you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, Chapleau's a beautiful place too. Isolated, but beautiful.
They moved to Norway now. They are not that far, and she is studying McMaster biologist with a specialization in geography and biodiversity. So she's plants. Oh my God. She's
awesome.
Amazing. She really knows, like I was explaining, I said, I see myself, like she knows. And before she moved from Chapleau, she put in front of the office buildings pollinator gardening. So yeah,
that's fantastic. Very good. That's something to be proud of. She is someone to be proud of.
Yeah. There we go. And she said, "Mom, the garden is there and it's growing." So that's a good sign.
When you go back to a garden that you created years ago and you see how it's filled in, especially if it's something like a pollinator garden. I did a biodiversity garden in Oakville and a little tiny thing just on a corner. But boy, you drive by now and it's like, wow, look at all the butterflies. This is amazing. You can see it grow. You've created something that will endure, something living, which is even cooler.
That's the word, because I came from a dad that he studied agriculture, like an engineer agriculture. I don't know in English how you say it, but yeah, he was all in plants, not animals. And so he grew cotton, he grew corn, he grew a lot of stuff. And he was so passionate because when he approached the field full of corn, he said, "Do you listen? They're growing."
It's easy to be passionate about horticulture. It's remarkable. You probably know this, there are bacteria in the soil that interact with the bacteria on your skin to release happy hormones in the brain.
Very nice.
The physical act of picking an apple soothes us. We're designed by Mother Nature to want to work in the garden, in plants. Hearing birds soothes us. It's easy to fall in love with planting things, whether it be for food, farming, or for just beauty.
I have another question that I would like to ask is like, what is the benefit of having a rain garden? Can you just...
So there are benefits to you in that they're beautiful, but there are also benefits to society. It takes stress off our stormwater systems. A rain garden is a garden that's designed to run the downspouts into, and they hold the water and soak it into the ground. And you plant them up with beautiful native plants. They don't have to be native plants, but a lot of the really cool, good rain garden plants happen to be native. So the water, instead of it rushing to the storm sewers, stays and soaks into the ground as much as possible. And so that takes stress off the infrastructure, means you have to water your garden less. So that takes stress off infrastructure. It means that there's going to be less erosion in our creeks. So not only do you help yourself, flooding has become the #1 insurance claim in Canada. So when we reduce the amount of water that's flowing into the stormwater systems, we reduce that flooding. But you're also helping preserve habitat for all the things that live in our waterways. Erosion has become a big problem because we have this sort of boom bust rain cycle, right? It rains and the water flows into the creeks, as opposed to seeping sideways through the soil, and keeping the creeks going. I asked my mom when I was a little kid, Mom, what keeps the rivers going when it hasn't rained in a while? She did not know. Now I know. It's called base flow. So some of the water goes down into the ground, but some of it goes down and then goes sideways into the creeks and rivers. So it gets cleaned when it goes there. It gets cooled when it goes there. And that all helps not just fish, but everything down, the invertebrates that they feed on, and all the things that live in and around the rivers. So it's a big picture thing. Also keeps our lakes cleaner. You know, some places like Ajax just built some huge, beautiful rain gardens maybe about 10 years ago. And that was to protect the lake from the phosphorus that was flowing out of the city, because that causes algal blooms. The algae grows, it dies, it deoxygenates the water, kills all the fish, and it stinks. So there's just quality of life things that go with rain gardens as well. But they're also just pretty. I saw the only thing other than a Rolls Royce that goes up in value after you buy it. The rain gardens incorporate beautiful plants, things like fireworks goldenrod and Helen's flower, sparkleberry, which is our native deciduous holly that's beautiful in the wintertime. Just really, really cool plants that you get to grow in these things.
I notice here, so I'm living right now in Oakville. So you walk to the lake shore and you see those beautiful houses, and also like every season they still have something. Like
Yes.
I learned from, I don't know where I read it, is like you plant for the 4 seasons.
Yes,
So I
you
don't know,
should. Yeah.
So you have plants and flowers every season. So
yes, even winter gardens, perhaps especially winter gardens, should be beautiful. Winter lasts a long damn time. A lot of us don't design gardens thinking of winter. We design gardens thinking of flowers in the summertime, and flowers aren't even the important thing. Flowers come and go. Texture will make or break your landscape. So you design with things that have sword-shaped texture and bold texture and feathery texture, and that's going to make your garden beautiful. And then if you plant things that have bones in the wintertime, things that are strong and can stand the snow and hold the snow beautifully, even things like coneflowers, they look gorgeous in the wintertime. And grasses look great in the wintertime, many of them. So you can have a garden that's beautiful all the time.
So, and also I noticed, because before I moved, I was living in Norway for 3 years. So I moved back because I used to live here. And I noticed this time roses, like everywhere you go is roses. I said, because I came from Mexico and roses are all year long. But then you move here and you feel like, oh my God, it's a plant that is not going to survive winter, but they do. And I'm impressed.
There's new, really amazing breeding being done with roses. Vineland Research and Innovation has their 49th parallel series. So there's Canadian Shield, which is a great big red thing. There's Aurora Borealis, which is a beautiful pink rose. There's Yukon Gold comes out next summer, and I'm forgetting one, Chinook. And they're semi-double roses, so you can see the yellow anthers on the inside, and that means that they're good for pollinators. And roses are super suited to clay soil. And if you're in Oakville and I'm in Milton, that's Clay City. Actually have brickyards, right? And they're super drought tolerant once they're established. You know, there's a lot going for roses. There are even native roses, lots of them, that are good for mass plantings because they run under the ground. So you don't want to put them in your regular garden because you're going to be fighting for a while to keep them under control.
Yeah.
But if you got the right place to make a drift of them, they're beautiful and great, great for many forms of life.
That's amazing. So what are you working right now in what project?
Well, I just actually got back from Beamsville just in time for the interview. The people down there actually getting a lot of work done in the Niagara Peninsula lately, which is interesting. The people down there wanted a habitat garden. They got a beautiful house that was apparently designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. So I actually get to put my brushstrokes on that, and it's all native-are, which is a cultivar of a native plant. So let's say it blooms pink in the wild, and someone found one that has white flowers. That would be a cultivar of this one. And if it's native, then we call it a native-are, or near native, something that's native, really, really near here. Because I believe in assisted migration, helping the plants move north so that the ecosystem can move with it as global warming happens. I designed and will begin installing next year a butterfly garden, a big butterfly garden in Beamsville, a city park butterfly garden. So we're going to expose all sorts of people to that. There's another job down that I'm working on the design for right now, down in Niagara on the Lake, and it's all habitat, birds, bringing in the birds to his landscape, reducing maintenance, and the native plants are great for that because they're really low input. Like all you do is cut them down in the spring. When you do cut your plants down, by the way, cut them down only to 6 or 8 inches. Leave those stems; they'll be covered up in no time. But all those hollow stems of all the perennials from last year become bee homes, or potentially become bee homes, and it's easier. But that was the guy that was like, meadow, yeah, great idea. So, really? So like again, lots of people are doing this sort of thing. Even I just did a design that Raymar Landscaping, 2 of my students actually, which is kind of cool. They brought me in to do the design for it, and it's in Queenston, so it's a really upscale neighborhood, and they've built this. They had this 1830s stone barn and house, and they've grafted them together with a super modern atrium and living structure. It's just beautiful. And you know, when you think about designing a landscape for a place like that, for a house like that, you don't think of eco, but I just sort of bury it there. If people don't ask me, I just do it. And they were thrilled, you know, to have pollinator plants and habitat and bird like plants that have berries and so on, and seeds. Everything's permeable. There's a little bit of lawn because they do music, they do concerts and stuff like that. So we're going to have concerts in this garden, and a lot of food plants as well. Food plants are really popular right now, but I don't punish them and put them in the corner like they've been bad. I weave them in through the entire garden. My garden right now has a whole bunch of plants in pots because I'm actually moving soon, so I can take all my veggies with me when I go. But like zucchini is a gorgeous plant. Eggplant is a gorgeous plant. Kale is a beautiful thing. So you know we can. Everybody's looking for one big lever to pull on to fix the world, and I don't think like that. There are all kinds of little levers in front of you, and you adjust a little bit at a time on each one, and you use every tool in the toolbox, even with rain gardens. At the front of my house right now, the rain comes down the downspout into a bog. The bog cleans the water, dumps it in a pond. That's going to evaporate 6 inches, an inch a day. If it overflows, there's a permeable pathway, and then it's sloped in the front, so there's a berm that catches the water. Instead of digging down to create a rain garden, I built a berm, and that's going to absorb a whole bunch of the water. If it gets past that, it goes out across the sidewalk. And until very recently, there was a little rain garden across the way as well. So like you use everything, not one big thing. And that's the same with all landscaping. I mean, that's rain specifically, but you can do so much good without sacrificing beauty. It's inspiring people.
I noticed cool. Here close by to where I live, they have still like wild like a field, and you notice every time that I go, I remember going early spring and you see flowers, and then you go back and you see another kind of flower. Those kind of flowers, we can call it wildflowers, or somebody put it there, or how they came there.
They're probably wildflowers. Now they may be native. in an urban setting, a lot of them might be introduced. So not probably from Europe, not from here, but they've naturalized here. Some of them might be invasive, unfortunately, but you just do your best to accept what you got, and maybe remove invasives if they're truly bad things. If they're on the Ontario Native Plant, no, the Credit Valley Conservation just released a new list of invasive species, an updated list. But so if they're on the list, then maybe you got to get rid of them. But otherwise, it'll be a combination of native and non-native, probably. A lot of goldenrods and asters in the fall. In the springtime, a lot of it's probably introduced. If it's that purple sort of waist-high plant, that's Dame's Rocket. That's actually lovely and good for pollinators, but it pushes out our native species. It's actually on the invasive list.
Can you
It's
mention some native ones? Like maybe I can kind of, because they have, I noticed pink, a little kind of purple, then the orange one, the like a sun we call that.
Well, I mean, there's the gardens that I'm designing now. I'll use the short spring natives, like some of the spring phlox varieties, like woodland phlox if it's shaded, and creeping phlox if it's not. Prairie smoke is a beautiful little plant, and it's a good spring flower. If I've got grasses in the garden, and I pretty much always do, maybe I'll plant Virginia bluebells, because it comes up with its big petal-shaped bluish leaves and then has true blue flowers. And then just as the grass is getting ready, the bluebells will die down. Or I'll mix Michigan lily with little blue stem. So the little blue stem's doing its thing in the summer. It's all nice and blue. And up above it pops Michigan lilies. And then when they die down, then the grass is just taking over and giving its color. I'll mix grasses with Canada columbine as well, because it doesn't usually look its best late in the summer. So I mix them so that there's something to kind of take over that footprint. And I'm doing that a fair bit in my designs, more bang for your buck space-wise. and you know, habitat-wise as well. Now you've got things for spring pollinators.
Some recommendation for somebody about gardening, where like all the experience that you have, what can be the 3 recommendation for your rain garden?
Oh boy, don't bite off more than you can chew. Create the garden that you can maintain for the first year. If you create massive gardens that you can't weed, then it becomes work and you'll hate it. So that's one big thing. As I said, don't focus on flowers as much. The flowers are a bonus. Focus on texture more, the bold, the feathery, and the grass-like, sword-shaped. And the other thing would be to try and have different seasons of bloom, as you just touched on. So I like to plant a red maple in my landscapes, the native Acer rubrum, because it's really good for early pollinator support. Same with the willows, are really good for early pollinator support. And then I'll plant things like asters and goldenrods for late fall, just when the monarchs are doing their thing. And ironweed is another one that's really good for late summer and early fall bloom. Those are all things. So I think about multiple levels of what a plant can do. So for instance, there's a pretty little plant called New Jersey tea, and it's a lovely little shrub that has white flowers now. And it's good for pollinators, and you can make tea out of it. But it's also food for the critically endangered mottled dusky winged butterfly. I'm thinking more and more about how to support obligate feeders, insects that have to feed on one species. So fritillary butterflies, big orange thing, beautiful. They have to feed on violets. The blue, there's a bunch of little butterflies that we call blues because they're blue. They feed on dogwoods. So planting dogwood in the landscape is good. Obviously, monarch for milkweeds, that would be the most famous one, or milkweed for monarchs. But pearly everlasting, excuse me, for painted lady butterflies. So these are These are all beautiful plants
Mm-hmm.
that help beautiful creatures. And then the more you plant for the birds, so Doug Ptolemy says plant an oak tree. The one, you plant an oak tree, you're feeding 534 species of butterfly and moth caterpillars. And then the birds feed on those. So you're giving sustenance to a great many species when you plant an oak tree. So that would be the third bit of advice is try and support a lot of habitat, not just pollinators or just birds or just butterflies. Try and get as much as you can.
I don't know. I wrote in some paper. I don't know that you cannot remove the weed right away. Like remember early spring, you got the dandelions and everything, and everybody's like rushing, cutting that, and that is food for the early. I don't know what kind of.
I think very carefully before I pull out something that Mother Nature planted. I think that's really worth thinking about. Is it going to grow well there? Is it going to be pretty? Is it going to support life? A squirrel planted a walnut outside my window, and walnuts don't actually kill the plants around them. It's turning out that that's a myth, or at least a misconception. Mm-hmm. But there's a gigantic moth called a Luna moth. Great big green tails, the whole thing's pale green. They feed on walnuts. So, okay, but let's leave that because it's good for walnuts and it's good for Luna moths. And the squirrels like them too. Not that that's probably one of my less favorite mammals. I'm also trying to get people to leave piles of sticks and rotting logs. I'm often bringing in a log to put in a garden, so that as it breaks down, it becomes habitat. And I have a big pile of sticks out back behind some shrubs. Like you don't walk into my garden and go, what's with the pile of sticks? But it's habitat. It's a place that animals can go and hide. We call it refugia, a refugia pile. The butterfly garden that I'm doing in Beamsville, we're going to build a butterfly teepee. So just a whole bunch of sticks all wired together at the top. And it'll be a place that they can go and hide during storms. So, there's a lot that we can do, and it's amazing. Fascinating, isn't it?
Fascinating. Really. I'm like, oh my God, yeah.
And when you see, there's no way that you'll be able to see this. Oh, maybe. Right there is a monarch egg. That little white spot there. That's a monarch egg. And when monarchs go floating gracefully through the garden, that's magic. It's amazing. And you plant milkweed. I planted a fairly horrible shrub called prickly ash, which I love saying because I gotta say kiss my prickly ash every time I say it. But it's food for the giant swallowtail, which is North America's largest butterfly. And so we planted this prickly horrible thing off in the back. And sure enough, the first day that this giant butterfly went wafting through the yard, it's like, oh my God, we did it! It's magic. It really is.
So, what is your favorite flower, if you have one?
Milkweed. All the varieties of milkweed, because they do so much good. They're insanely fragrant. You can eat. You can fritter the flowers. You don't have to fritter them. That's a lot of work. You can just boil them and boil them just really quick, more blanche really, and then put them in whatever you want. The seed pods, it's time for me to go harvest the seed pods. I've got enough milkweed, and the neighborhood has plenty of milkweed. You can even harvest the new shoots in the springtime and cook them like asparagus. I don't obviously harvest all because I'm leaving some for the monarchs, but you can. It's a plant that is pretty. There's marsh milkweed, which is a nice little clump former. It's blooming now. Gets about 4 feet tall, maybe. I'm measuring up myself. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I've got lots of common milkweed. I love the fragrance of the flowers. I just grew a whole bunch of poke milkweed from seed. That's my dog. And it's a shade tolerant milkweed. And I've got one out back called showy milkweed, which has these big spectacular flowers on it. So like there's lots of beautiful milkweeds, and once they're established, you don't have to water them ever. They don't have a lot of winter interest, but a lot of them have good fall color. So that's, a good bang for your buck there. The common milkweed, if you can reconcile refereeing, because it spreads, right? It runs under the ground. So I just pull out the ones that are where I don't want them, or if they're interfering with other plants, I just pull them out. To be ruthless about that, because I got it all over here. But in the fall, those big, bold, textured leaves turn gold. So there isn't a lot of bold in the native palette, in the native plant palette. So milkweed is really good for providing that bold and good yellow fall color. So I think a lot about fall color. One of my favorite shrubs is silky dogwood, and it has beautiful red fall color, white flowers in the springtime, and blue berries, which is kind of funky that the birds like.
So I noticed also they're close by in some houses in more in the front of the lake in Lakeshore. I noticed blueberries. So what is it, like a wild ones? And I was
it could be that. It could be one of the other viburnums. Viburnums often have blueberries, and they're really good, edible, delicious actually.
I was even saying to grab one, but I said, oh, maybe that's not a good idea.
I would want to, you know what I use? I use iNaturalist a lot. I mean, I know my jazz, but I don't, nor will I ever know everything. So I use an app on my phone called iNaturalist, and you take a picture of it, of whatever, be it a bug or a plant or a fungus, and it tells you with a great degree of accuracy what it is. And then other people check your work. So like other scientists and citizen scientists check it over. So they'll correct you. And then you can learn more about that thing and find out, for instance, if you can eat it. Although I'm very cautious about foraging. Like people go harvest ramps, wild leeks. And, they say, well, we only take 10%. How about get some seed, grow it, and then grow it in your own garden instead? Because if everybody goes and takes 10%, then there's not going to be very much very soon. And it's a plant that's threatened, actually.
So my daughter and her husband goes down there for picking mushrooms, like a wild mushroom.
That's fine. Knock yourself out on mushrooms because you're only picking the fruit. That's what people don't realize. And you got to be super careful with mushrooms. There's about 4 of them that are really obvious, and the mimics are really bad. Like they're poor mimics. Like they don't. You're not fooling anyone, buddy. But the little brown mushrooms could go either way, and they're really tough to tell apart. But yeah, with mushrooms, it's the plant, as it were, is really the root system that's under the ground. The mushroom that we see, people pick mushrooms out of the garden thinking that they're getting rid of the mushrooms. Well, first of all, the mushrooms aren't doing anything bad. They might well be doing something good. But you're just picking the fruit. It's okay to pick as many mushrooms as you like.
Very nice. Something else that you want to add?
Oh, goodness.
For the young generation that you are excited that someone is becoming more aware of the environment and everything?
Well, from a professional standpoint, I think we need to see ourselves as deserving capes. I think we tend to underestimate ourselves as horticulturists, and therefore we don't, frankly, charge what we can and should, because we don't see ourselves as valuable. And I think if we saw ourselves more, we have to know as much as doctors do, plus plumbing and electricity. Like the amount of knowledge that you need to be a horticulturist is vast, and we say, oh, I'm just a gardener. And I think we need to get away from that. I think we need to believe in ourselves as experts, and stewards of the earth. Not only do we increase home values and bring beauty to people's lives and relaxation, but we're also capable of fixing the planet. I love driving past places that I did 20 years ago and looking at the trees that I planted 40 years ago and looking at the trees that I planted and thinking of the carbon that is sequestered in those trees. Like we do good as horticulturists, and I think we need to remember that more.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sean. Have
Thank
a
you.
great day.
You too. It's been a pleasure.
We'll be in contact. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Take care. Bye
Great
bye.
day. Bye bye.